Well, it's a very popular idea that you hear and read everywhere. Unfortunately, looking a little deeper into the idea, we see some problems. But first, the reason people say this, it's true in the ancient world, there were gods or heroes who in some cases are reported to do miracles. They, in a few cases, supposedly were born of a virgin. They did exorcisms. They, in some cases, were claimed to have been killed and then raised from the dead. So we hear these stories and we say, wow, that does sound an awful lot like Jesus. In fact, some try to say things like, well, maybe the Jesus of the Gospels is a plagiarism of these other ancient stories. The problem with all this is that it denies some very simple facts. Number one, the history of Jesus is profoundly different than the mythical, and I would put it this way, obviously mythical nature of the pagan gods. For instance, we live at a time when even non-believing scholarship recognizes the historical Jesus cannot be denied. And in fact, not only did he live and die, but he is recognized to be this amazing figure from the ancient world, such that even if you deny that he worked miracles or any of that, we know more about him as an historical person than anyone from antiquity. Contrast this with, say, the Homeric gods or heroes or any of the other Roman gods and heroes from the past. It's just a dramatically different situation. And in the case of Jesus, we indeed now find that many non-Christian scholars will even say things like, it's apparent from these amazingly early documents. Notice I'm referring to both non-biblical documents as well as the biblical documents we call the Gospels and the New Testament letters, that these are so early that even if you don't accept them as the Word of God, they are so early that they relate eyewitness testimony of a man that these scholars who are not Christians will admit appears to have been some kind of miracle worker. We live at such a time that his historical resurrection is indeed one of the most talked about features of historical Jesus studies today. And the majority even of non-Christian scholars recognize something so amazing happened that they come up with counter theories that are very similar to what we've seen throughout history. And these counter theories really become implausible if you don't simply reject the history because you are, let's say, a philosophical naturalist and you believe that miracles are impossible. So, on the one hand, we have the problem of an historical person, indeed the most influential person in all of history, documented by historiography that transcends anything that we have from the ancient world, that can only be rejected precisely because of a philosophical viewpoint, not because of history, contrasted with mythological figures. But secondly, the person of Jesus is so profoundly different than any of the other so-called heroes or gods that we look at in these other mythologies. Let me give you a couple of reasons why. First of all, his philosophical portrayal. It's true that, for instance, if you read, say, the Iliad or the Odyssey, you will see that there are miracles all over the place. You will have gods, say, for instance, arguing with one another. And those arguments will lead to dramatic changes, let's say, in weather patterns on earth and sea. The very real difference in the case of Jesus is that you see a world that's much like our own, wherein God's ordinary providence, the seasons are, as he promises all the way back in Genesis, they're regular, they reflect his faithfulness. But unlike the Homeric gods, in which a hero is at their mercy, and the weather patterns are capricious and unpredictable. The very real difference is that the Jesus of the Bible actually can change these standard, reflecting of God's faithfulness type of weather patterns because he is indeed God. Very, very different philosophical portrayal, unlike anything else in history. Secondly, his teachings and his character are so different than anything else you see in these ancient mythologies. I would simply say to someone interested in this subject, compare and contrast. Don't just take a general talking point, but actually read the Gospels and see what that person of Jesus looks like, and then read one of the so-called mythologies or pagan god stories and see if they sound at all the same. And then I would argue a better starting place would be to read a book like, say, Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. It's a good introduction to the very issue we're talking about, where you can see there is very real scholarship that supports the amazing testimony Christians have of knowing this raised Jesus in our prayer life, in the way he changes us, and most importantly, in the way he forgives us.
Thanks for watching Honest Answers. You can submit your questions by email, Twitter, or in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to find out the answer to next Wednesday's question.